Hey guys, welcome back. Hopefully you've watched part one of SeaTow Venice and BigToy. So we kind of did that. We took a little ride and now we're back on this lift, kind of sitting here and going over a few other things. Take a minute to recap video one. We went over the EPIRB, what they do and the importance of them. Strongly suggest that you get one with the built-in GPS if you're going to get one. Also, we went over the personal radio beacon to wear on yourself if you fall in. And then also we went over the distress calling on a VHF radio. I was afraid maybe we left off at that with the impression that the VHF was only for distress calling. That's not the case, so we're going to go into a little bit more about the conveniences of the VHF. So take a few minutes, we're going to talk about that. So here we go. So before we get into that, I want to talk about the DSC. So you called it digital select calling is the technical name of it. I refer to it as distress calling because that's kind of more how we think of it and how we're going to use it. So I'll refer to it as distress calling button. If you have a VHF radio that does not have the built-in GPS, but it has the DSC button or switch, it'll be bright red on all radios, whether it's a switch or a button. Most of those can be linked to your existing GPS so that when you hit the DSC, even though the radio is not capable of its locating itself, the GPS will send the coordinates through the radio and broadcast it, accomplishing the same thing. I'm not going to get into how to do it because every radio and every GPS link's different, but if you have a button and you don't have GPS on the radio, do some research. You could probably link it to your GPS to accomplish that for a very minimal cost, if any. So anyway, so now on to the good side of the VHF, or the fun side, or the practical side. The VHF can be used for a lot of things. You would stay on channel 16, as you call it, the hailing. And let's say I'm coming into the Venice Inlet and I want fuel and I don't know where to go because I'm not familiar with the area. How would you kind of go about getting some location and some help at that point?
Well, the first thing I would do is, you want to be on channel 16, of course. Make sure your volume's up, make sure your squelch is closed as much as possible. And the way you do that is you turn that squelch button down till you hear the static, and then you just barely move it up till that goes away. That way you know you're going to be receiving at the greatest distance also. But you can get on that radio and you can ask for local knowledge. You can say, this is motor vessel, real time, and coming into the Venice Inlet, and I'd like to speak with get some local knowledge on where to get fuel. More than likely a local boater or the local marina that's right near the area is going to come up. They're going to acknowledge you, say real time, for example, this is so-and-so marina. Let's switch to a working channel. And usually they'll have a working channel in mind. There are several that different boaters use. For example, there's 68, there's 69, there's 72, 73. Some boaters use 17 and 8, and there's a lot of different ones. So it's real important, Brian, that people switch immediately off of channel 16. The reason for this is it's there for emergency and hailing only, like you first said. So emergency means that if you're talking on it and someone else has an emergency, they can't get a message in or call anybody as long as there's other people that are just having idle chatter on that. So you would call out on channel 16, this is motor vessel real time, like some local knowledge or local marina, let me know where I can come in to get some fuel or provisions or whatever. Most always you're going to have somebody answer you. They're going to ask you to switch to a working channel. You switch to that working channel, acknowledge that you're going to switch to the channel that they asked you to. If they say switch to channel 7.2, say Roger, switching to channel 7.2. Then both stations can go to channel 7.2 and continue on the conversation from there. Whether it be you want local knowledge on any dangerous conditions coming in the inlet, if there's any shoals, any markers out of place, where you might go to get fuel or provisions or a bite to eat or what have you. A lot of other things we hear is just, you're out on your boat and your friend's out on his boat too. So if you want to call him, he's always going to be on 16. You're always going to be on 16. So you call your friend on channel 16 and then immediately switch to the working channel.
So basically 16, as you said, is for distress and hailing only, and you want to get off it as quick. And then once you get to a alternate channel with both parties, you and whoever you're calling, then you're free to just have a conversation for hours, correct?
Even go as long as
yeah, because you're not
point.
holding up anybody in a distress or anything.
Sure.
So, and that's the point we'd like to make. So the quicker you short and sweet to the point on channel 16, get what you need, make an agreement what channel you're going to, switch to it, and then the urgency goes away, and then you can just sit and have an idle conversation for an hour on that channel, or, you know, not realistically, but as long as you need to get all the information you want in a more relaxed, casual pace. So that would be the good side of the VHF. I think that pretty much covers everything.
Well, yeah, one other thing I'd like to mention is that if you are on channel 16 and you call for a distress, Coast Guard's going to answer you back. They're not going to want you to switch to a working channel. They're going to stay on 16 with you. If it becomes a prolonged mission to where they need to be on the radio with you, they might switch it to one of their Coast Guard stations. For example, 22 Alpha is a common one that they'll switch you to once they've established who you are, where you are, what you need. They might switch you over to 22 while they're getting help to you. The one other thing I'd like to mention is that you do not want to do radio checks on channel 16. The Coast Guard frowns upon this. FAA frowns upon this. The FCC frowns upon this. They don't want you on there just doing radio checks. So if you want to check your radio, call a friend, call a marina, switch to a working channel, and then get the radio check. And the other thing is SeaTow has an automated radio check station. In most areas, it's either 26 or 27. You can call on 26 or 27 for a radio check, and there's a computer that'll automatically answer you, tell you where the antenna is so you know what your range is, and then it plays a recording of your voice back to you so you have a good idea of how you sound to other boaters in the area.
Yeah, maybe you don't want to hear that, I don't know.
Yeah,
I know I wouldn't want to hear that, but anyway, you sound the way you sound, so be it. The other thing that I'd like to touch on before we go on, and it's a good point, not doing radio checks on 16, and I'm glad SeaTow's got that for us to check, and you should do it every time you head offshore. Just, you never know when the radio's going to have an issue and go down.
Right.
You could, quite commonly, as they get older, you could be receiving and not able to transmit through the mic. We see that often. So
I can tell you for a fact that every commercial boat, law enforcement boat in the area uses that automated radio check every day before they go out. It's just part of their protocol.
Right, and it would, because just because you can receive and hear, don't assume you can transmit, because again, often the transmit side of a VHF will go down and the receive is still working fine.
Right.
So I'm going to make that point. The other point I'd like to make quickly, we talked about the DSC, I'm going to call it distress calling again. When you buy a radio, or if you've already owned a radio, there's a way to link that DSC. When you flip that switch, it will identify who you are, and I don't believe we got into that last time, did we?
Not really, we didn't talk about it much.
But there's you go to the FCC, you fill out a card, and you tell them who you are, the description of the vessel, and your emergency contact information. So if you flip that switch, let me back up, then they will send you a code that you have to have put in that VHF radio. And the point I'd like to make, if you do that, be very careful putting that code in and make sure it's accurate, because I've had people do it haphazardly and enter the wrong code inadvertently, and that radio has to get sent back to the manufacturer to get that code out to program the right code, and there is a charge for that, obviously. So if you do the code, take your time inserting it in the radio, and then once you do that, if you ever activate that DSC, the Coast Guard will immediately know who did it, where the vessel is, what the vessel is, where it's home, emergency contact information. If you want to put any medical stuff on there, you have that ability as well. And I believe that's like $15.
Well, the MMS,
to get that.
What we're referring to is the MMSI number. And the MMSI number is assigned, the Coast Guard has a lot of these numbers, but one of the best resources for that is the U.S. Power Squadron. You can contact them by phone through their 800 number or by email, and they will for free assign you an MMSI number that you can put into your radio for the distress calling, or the DSC. Oh,
good. I wasn't aware of that, because I've been telling everybody to send it in, and it's like a $15 charge. So that's good to know. A little bit of help from SeaTow and Craig there. So actually, I want to go one step further, because Craig on his boats, now that we've talked about the safety lanyard, he's actually got one in his hand. So you can see the safety lanyard here. This is typical on all boats. Again, it just clips. And then if you want to just check the verification it's going to work, just pull that off with the motor idling. The minute it comes off, that motor should shut off. Obviously, you got to reinsert it before the motor will start. And then this end should be clipped to the captain of the boat. So we'll leave you that. But Craig goes one step further, because safety is always paramount on everybody's mind that spends a lot of time on the water. It should be on everybody's mind, regardless of how much time you spend on the water. But on all his boats, he's got a digital one. And I'm going to let Craig take over from here and explain what he's got and how it works and the benefits of it. So here you go, Craig.
Brian, what this is it's called an MOB, and that stands for Man Overboard. There's a company that produces this item, and it's a no-brainer for us in SeaTow. We still use the safety cord. This is still a part of our boat. We plug it in. The boat won't start without it in place, like Brian was saying. But then in addition to that, the boat still won't start for us unless we activate this FOB. It's a fob. And what we do is we keep this in our pocket. It's Bluetooth enabled, so it communicates with the ignition system on the boat. So once we plug our lanyard in, we turn our key to the on position, we have a device in the boat that will beep that let us know that we have not paired with this fob yet. So what the captain does at that point is he holds it in for about a second, then the ignition system comes live. The beautiful thing about this little fob is we can put it in a pocket on our life jacket, in our pocket, our pants pocket. They make wristbands that you can put these on and necklaces. And the function of this item is if we get more than about 100 feet away from the boat, the engines die completely. Whether it's one engine or two engines or four engines, it doesn't matter. They're all hooked into this. So if you can fast forward that and think about if you were to get thrown overboard from the boat would travel not more than 100 feet and the engines would die. So that way you don't have the boat going all the way across the Gulf of Mexico and you have no help, no way of getting in, no way of getting help or getting a message out.
Sure. Now the other point we were talking about these is you can pair those for more than one, correct? You can go up to 6?
Correct. They make units where you can put multiple fobs. The nice thing about that is we talked in part 1 about the scenario where maybe someone goes out to the back of the boat by himself and they fall in and nobody sees him. Well, if that person has a fob, the captain has a fob, you know, the first mate has a fob, you can even put a fob on your dog. If a lot of people like to take their pets out on the water with them, these go right into the life jacket that hopefully you have on your pet. If the pet goes overboard without anybody seeing it, which happens a lot, the boat motors will die and everybody will stop at that point and say, the MOB will alert you that one of the fobs has gotten away from the boat. So you'll know to account for everybody and all your pets and loved ones.
Much quicker than
yeah, it's happening right now.
Conversation, or, you know, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now the other thing about this is once that fob gets away from the boat, the captain can push the button on the boat to override to start the engines to drive back to the person or the pet that's fallen overboard. So even if you don't recover the fob, or let's say you showed up to the boat one day and you forgot your fob and you can't get it started, there is a button that you can push to override to make that to where you don't have to have the fobs. I don't recommend going out without your fobs, but sometimes if you're out offshore and you lose your fob and you can't reactivate it, it's a necessity. It's better to not have it and get in than to you know, not have a way to get your engine started.
Good point. So I think that takes care of all of our safety. Probably the only thing that brings a thought to mind is I personally have never had anyone fall off on a boat. I've never had to go back and rescue someone, but I have had to go back and rescue and retrieve hats quite often. So I would say the procedure, I want to just talk quickly for those that haven't done rescues, and you're not Coast Guard, you're not rescue, although you do respond with them a lot as assistance and more for the boat salvaging, correct? Or
that's
trying
right.
to prevent sinking. So we're not trying to say that you're first responder by any means, although you do go with them often as assistance. But back to that, if you do have somebody, a pet or a person that falls overboard, a couple things, and I'll do what I would do in my procedures to go back and retrieve that item or person, and then I'll let Craig go and do what he does, because there's a lot of ways of doing this right. Everybody's going to have their own little spin. So for me, if I'm going back to retrieve something that come off the boat, the first thing I'm going to do is turn around and look and see what's behind me. I'm not going to immediately pull the throttles back, because I might have a boat 50 feet off my tail running as fast as I am. And if I do that, I don't give them time to react, and the next thing you know, they're driving over top of you. The other thing I won't do is just immediately do a U-turn to go back. Same reason. I don't want a boat over here following me, and I do an immediate right turn, and here I am getting T-boned. So I want to stress this point, because I hear it often. Something happens, and you're going to go back. first reaction is either to pull the throttles or do a U-turn. Don't do that. Look behind you, make sure there's no conflict with that, and then slow the boat and do a U-turn. Even if it's a person that's off the boat, you don't want to make your situation much worse by having a collision with another boat or a marker or running aground and getting someone else hurt. So you want to take a few seconds, process, make sure there's no conflict, slow the boat down, do a U-turn, go back and get them. What I would do at that point, and again, I've never had to retrieve a person, but I've retrieved items that have come off a boat. I would, if I got an extra person on the boat, I'll put them in the bow and I'll have them spot the item or the person for me. And as I approach it, they're pointing to it as I'm getting there, and I'm going to approach it right to the side, especially if it's a person. You don't want to come straight at it. You want to come to that person off to the side, and then as I get close to it, I'm going to be at a very slow speed, and then as I get close, I'm going to pull the boat neutral and let it slowly guide up. And if it's a person, we'll either reach over and get them or hand them a line or whatever is appropriate given sea conditions, and then safely get them back in the boat. That would be me. Do you have any suggestion or a different thought that you would do in that situation?
Yeah, you're pretty much right on. The only thing I might add is that if there's a considerable amount of wind or current, that you come and approach that person downwind or down current. Because what sometimes will happen, especially with larger boats, is if you go on the upwind side of the person, let's say Brian's in the water, the wind's this way, and I come here, when I stop, the wind or the current's going to drift my boat right over top of Brian. And if he's already struggling in the water, that can be really bad. If I come up on the downwind portion, that makes it easier for somebody to get a line, a life ring, or whatever to the person to get stable in the water and then get them in the boat.
Very good point. Very good point. So we wrap this up. I'd like to add a couple of thoughts of mine. You know, I want to take a few minutes and say to you, when you get on a boat, whether it's your boat, a rental boat, a friend's boat, it doesn't matter. Whether you're driving the boat or you're just sunbathing on the boat, it doesn't matter. When you get on that boat, be aware of where the safety stuff is. Be aware of where the fire extinguisher is. Be aware of where the life jackets are. Be aware of where the throwable is on the boat. Maybe even be aware of where the flares are if you're offshore. And you want to literally look at them and process it, so to say. Don't just get on the boat and go, yeah, and take off. Because when things are going wrong, a lot of stuff happens fast. I mean, seconds become minutes. You got a fire on the boat, you got a person in the water. You don't want to start rummaging through the boat to find what you need. You got to know where the fire extinguisher is, you got to know where the life jacket is, you got to know where the throwable is, you got to know where the flares are. And so if you do that every time you get on the boat, even if it's yours and you know where this is, mentally look at the fire extinguisher, look at the compartment where the throwable is, look at the compartment where the flares are, look at the compartment where the life jackets are, so that the mind is in tune with your boat on that day. And that way, when you're off and you're doing something and you need it, you got a panic situation, the mind will recall that much quicker than trying to process it where it's at. That's the biggest thing I would think of. For me, that's about it. It's going to wrap it up. Do you have any thoughts to add at this point?
That's all great stuff. Really good points.
So, want to really thank you guys for taking the time to watch these videos. Hopefully they were informative for you. The whole goal of this is to inform you on boating and safety, and so we all enjoy the day. We are going to go on to another episode, quite a few. So we'll be doing law enforcement, we'll be doing Coast Guard, we'll be doing basic courtesy on the water, we'll be doing driving skills. So stay tuned, a whole lot more to come. Thanks, have a great day. Brian McMurphy with BigToy.
Craig Markham with SeaTow.
Thank you.
Thanks.